Welcome to Professor Sky's Spam channel, where I talk about everything except for new music. This is my third time trying to talk about the 2022 Oscars. I've discarded two different versions of this, and I'm tempted to even not try to do this, but my wife encourages me to really try to stick through and to put something out there, because I think more needs to be said about what transpired in some of the worst television I've seen in my entire life. Some of the most offensive and egregious television I have seen in my entire life. Now, before I get into it, I'm an Oscar fan. These books right here, these are like my collection of books that are given to Academy members at the Oscars. That's how much of an Oscar fan I am. I watch them every year. I'm still recovering from the fact that neither Pulp Fiction nor Babe beat Forrest Gump in 1994. But I love the pageantry. I love the arts being celebrated. I love movies. So that's why last night was really such a travesty. Now, I'm not talking about the slap. I am briefly going to touch on the slap. But there's a different moment in the show which I really think is the worst thing I have ever seen on television. The most offensive thing I have ever seen on television. But let's talk about the slap for a second. The discourse around the slap is obviously on the actual physical violence, and that makes sense. That's the flashy thing, that's the surprising thing, that's the shocking thing. And the discourse around it makes sense. It's a big moment, and there's a lot of different ways we could talk about this, but I'm not seeing it discussed in the context of patriarchy, which is what it really was. You see, it's not the hit that interests me, but what he said afterwards. Keep my wife's name out of your mouth. Out of your effing mouth. By phrasing it that way, he's not just coming to her defense because she has a medical condition and Chris Rock is making fun of it in a very tasteless and not cool joke. Alopecia is not easy and it's hard to live with. I know people with alopecia, and it's hard. It's a hard situation. It's a hard way to be, especially if part of your job is looking a certain way, right? So already just the joke is low, and we know it's workshopped. So there's an entire crew of people who came up with this joke, and Chris Rock makes the joke, but whatever. It's not that Will Smith is fighting for her. He's saying, keep my wife's name out of your mouth. Grr, woof. He's being possessive. He is staking his claim. He is making his argument that Chris Rock is attacking his property. Stop touching my property. That's what this is actually saying. This is the problem. And the reason that I find it so interesting in this particular case is that last year, maybe the year before, Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith had this amazing roundtable where they sat at this red table and discussed Jada Pinkett Smith's infidelity. It was an amazing moment of television where Will Smith was very clearly upset, but he was understanding, he was compassionate, and he behaved in a way that showed like an understanding of the difficulties of marriage and the difficulties of monogamy that was truly astounding. But what happened? He became the butt of a joke. Everyone called him a cuckold, cuck. His masculinity was put into question because he did not respond with rage at his property being stolen. It's in that way, that's the context, I think, of this moment, where Will Smith is, in a certain extent, expressing a sort of impotent rage that he might have been feeling before. He's taking out all of his anger and his violence on this comedian. I think the toxic masculinity, which he did not display before, I use the TM word, I'm sorry. The word exists because it describes a real phenomena. That he didn't exhibit before, he is exhibiting here. And there's also the problem of the power imbalance. The fact that he was able to basically commit a crime and just sit and not go anywhere and win an award half an hour later is spectacular. The height difference is also, he's a much larger man. He really is punching down in every single possible way. Then, of course, there's a whole different discourse that can be had about black masculinity and black American masculinity, which obviously I am in no position to discuss. But I imagine there's going to be some interesting dialogue that's going to be happening around this about representations of black masculinity, fatherhood, husbandhood, all of these different kinds of things, all happening all at once. Now, unfortunately, the upshot of this whole thing is that I've already seen a lot of borderline dog whistly racist memes. That's what I'm already seeing, like less than 24 hours after it. The sum result of most of this is going to be an excuse for racists to say things that don't seem racist, but we know are. But it's not the slap that I found the most offensive. Nor is it the joke. I actually really didn't like the joke. Again, I think it's really mean-spirited. But what really bothered me the most was the Regina Hall COVID joke. So if you didn't see the whole 4.5 hours of misery, there was a joke where Regina Hall, the comedian, this is the premise. The COVID tests didn't work. I need to bring people up backstage and give them a special COVID test. That's the setup. The execution of the joke is that the people who she brings up are all men who are single, and this is all a pretext for her to sexually assault them. That's the joke, okay? That is literally the joke. Now, first of all, that the premise is built on COVID is insane. It is insane that this whole joke comes out with her saying, I have bad news about COVID. I'm thinking, oh my God, did Anthony Hopkins die? He's alive, right? Like, oh my God, did somebody I love die of COVID, like just before the show started? Is that what's happening right now? Is it not true that tens of thousands of people in our country have COVID right now? Is it not true that about 1 million people have died in the last 2.5 years just in our country? Is it not true that a couple 100 million people in our country are suffering through various kinds of trauma based on either the confinement, the reaction to, the existence of, dead relatives from, sicknesses from, long-term COVID from, whatever it is that's been happening? This isn't quite a joking matter. We're not at the joking phase if we ever are. If she came out there and said, uh-oh, I think maybe one of the Sandy Hook shooters is in the audience. Ooh, Columbine. We don't laugh about these things, unless you're Gilbert Gottfried. We don't laugh about these things because they're not funny and because people are suffering. Like real death is happening and we are really feeling that death. So that's the premise of the joke. The premise of the joke is, hey, everybody who's nervous about being around here because of all the death and misery that's been going on, let's laugh about this potential super spreader event. Let's laugh about this death. And then comes the bad stuff. The men who she brings up on stage are all attractive. It's this objectifying of these men. Part of what makes it so offensive is that it's so clearly workshopped because the men that she chose were all of different races. So it's very clear, like, oh, well, let's not be offensive while doing this offensive little joke here. The power imbalance that's implied in this moment where she has the microphone and she's calling these people up and they sort of have to follow her and they have to just stand there. And the joke is that she is abusing the power that was given to her to get access to touch men. Then things get even worse. When she mentions some actor from Euphoria. I've never watched Euphoria. I don't like being sad. I mean, I don't mind being sad, but I don't know. It just seems way too sad for me. Something Elordi. And the first joke she makes is that he's legal now. And then I explained this to my son who didn't watch the Oscars, and he didn't believe me. Let me explain this funny joke. You are technically of age, so I'm going to take you backstage. I'm going to strip you naked. I'm going to force my tongue down your throat. I am going to film all sorts of freaky stuff with you and put it on the internet. That's the joke, that this young actor is going to be sexually violated against his will in the name of COVID safety. As if all of this wasn't bad enough. On top of all of that, a little later in the show, Wanda Sykes, who is by far the best of the hosts of the show, makes a little joke about Harvey Weinstein. little Harvey Weinstein joke at the Oscars. How funny is it that that monster who raped countless women and whose power came from Hollywood and whose name was said hundreds of times on that very stage, someone whose power came from Hollywood, came from this kind of power imbalance that is now a joke. How funny that we can laugh about COVID and Harvey Weinstein right now. Isn't this funny? Aren't those victims silly billies? Silly billy victims on your respirators and in your therapy sessions. Let's all laugh about it. Let's all think about a 17-year-old person who just turned 18 and is now being forcibly molested by someone with more power at the Oscars. And it even gets worse. I had my wrong notes. I was wondering. And then it even gets even worse. Where she calls up Josh Brolin and Jason Momoa, both underrated actors. They're both well-loved, but they're both underrated actors, I think. And the joke is that she has to touch them a lot because they might have COVID. She touches all over their bodies and she molests them and like rubs against their genitals. That's the joke. It's unclear whether or not they knew that was going to be the joke. But this is sexual assault on men played for laughs. I'm going to include in the description a link to an amazing video by pop culture detective called Sexual Assault on Men Played for Laughs that describes this long history. Men suffer from sexual assault. From men, from women. This is a very real phenomenon. There's not many people out there who are working hard to show this and to explain this. I think Terry Crews is a national treasure. Yeah, he was President Camacho, but he is so much more because as a very strong, able-bodied black man bodybuilder, the image of a certain kind of masculinity, he was able to explain how he was sexually molested and sexually abused, helping to break the myth that if you're strong enough, you won't be molested. These jokes, it's not cute. It's not funny. It's as funny as it's as funny as any sexual abuse is funny. And it really bothers me. And I'm not saying like cancel Regina Hall or whatever. I don't know. I don't know. She seems funny enough. She's not the problem, you know. There's no hashtag for this. What I would like is instead of spending all of our energy thinking, well, what would you do if Chris Rock insulted your wife? Wouldn't you slap him? We shouldn't be talking about that. We should be talking about these deeper issues. And we should be celebrating Terry Crews. And on YouTube, FD Signifier has been hinting at a video that he's been in preparation to make about sexual abuse of men. He talks about it a fair amount. This needs to be a discussion that needs to happen more. So, let's have it. Let's let Regina Hall, let's let this terrible sketch be the impetus. And I'm not, like, let's start that conversation. Beyond all that, it's not like this stuff that women objectifying men is like good for women either. It's not. Like doing things in reverse, oh, now it's our turn, justifies the behavior in the first place. So I'm thinking, you know, like how much the entire Oscars that I saw just really feeds the alt-right, feeds the far-right wing, so many things that I saw. And that whole Regina Hall sketch is perfect fodder for men's rights activists, for the MRAs, because they can just say, oh, what aboutism? Oh, so, you know, what if, I don't know, Michael Keaton went up there and brought Billie Eilish up and talked about, about shoving his tongue down her throat, and what would we say about that, right? The injustice of it. It feeds this idea that we shouldn't be striving for equality and autonomy and not forcing ourselves onto other people, but that, well, everybody would do it. So It's not such a big deal if it happens to women, because if women had the power, they would do it to men. But we need to be doing more, not just justifying this terrible behavior. And all of that in the greater context that the performative wokeism of the Oscars is so high. I'm far to the left, but this stuff made me want to throw a MAGA hat on. I was just getting out of my mind with the amount that people were just performing this wokeness all the same time as they're supporting this insane power imbalance and patriarchy and sexual abuse. And, we just deserve better as a society. I just think, okay. So there we go. Maybe this video will make it up. Maybe I'll erase it and record it again tomorrow. I don't know. But that's my thoughts. Patriarchy is bad, and men are capable of being sexually abused, and it's not funny. It's not funny to laugh at men being raped in the shower and in jail, and it's not funny to see Jason Momoa being touched by a person when he can't do anything about it, when he can't defend himself. I don't want to see Aquaman powerless and sexually abused. That's actually triggering for a lot of people. So, anyways, he's a good actor. My man. All right. Jesus Christ. I'm going to put my glasses back on and think about whether or not I should have released this or not. I don't know. Am I woke scold now? Should I just stick to talking about video games? All right. There's the camera.